Facebook. Hello, everyone who's joining us over on our Facebook group. This panel is about writing during a pandemic, which is a panel I never ever thought we'd ever need to discuss. But you know, life has happened, and suddenly some COVID thing has come along and really just changed everybody's lives. So you know, how do we be creative in this new environment? So we've got some fantastic authors who are going to be telling us what COVID meant for them, and they're going to introduce themselves now. If we want to start with Kit, do you want to say a couple of words about yourself?
Oh, hey, thanks, Amanda. So I'm Kit Mallory. I am the author of a YA dystopian duology, which is set in the UK and just edges a little bit too close to real life at some points these days. So my novels are called Blackout and Sparks. That's the second one. I think you can probably see them on the camera behind me, hopefully. And I suppose for context, in terms of this discussion, I also work full-time as a mental health professional, and I've been working remotely from home during the whole pandemic. So yeah, I thought that might be useful context for this.
Absolutely. It's going to be very interesting to get your input on that. Jen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, on the back of that, I'm Jenn Matthews, and I am also working in mental health as a healthcare assistant. I have not been working from home. I have been on the wards. So I work in rehabilitation, which not drugs and alcohol, but mental health rehab. So we teach people to do stuff basically and be independent. And we shut in April because we can't do that at the moment. So I've been working on an older adult acute ward, which is completely different from what I'm used to, and it made me very unwell. So I had some time off, and I've just gone back a few hours a day. So I write contemporary romance. My first book's called Hooked on You, and is about two women in their 50s who meet over a crochet class. And my second book is called The Words Shimmer, and that's about a paramedic and a university lecturer in their 40s who meet via doing a gardening group for kids. My third book is called Reasons to Heal, which is about a woman who is a physiotherapist. You know what, I was thinking psychologist, and I don't know why, because that's stupid. Physiotherapist from Zimbabwe, and a newbie cop called Molly. And they meet because Molly gets injured, and it's sort of a clash of cultures, and a bit of kind of a coming of age little bit story for Molly. And I have another book out in January, which is called Sing for My Baby. And then I have a fifth book out in about a year and a half. And that's kind of untitled. I don't like the title that we've given it so far. But I basically write about people that are different, so people who are older, people who have disabilities, people from different races, different cultures. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Jen. And Lola, how about you?
Last but hopefully not least, Lola Keeley, also a contemporary romance author. No mental health qualifications, other than on the receiving end of some excellent mental health treatment over the years, thankfully. But yeah, I had a unique experience during the pandemic of kind of being in the middle of about 5 different things when it all hit, and none of them being particularly able to hit pause on. So I was doing a master's in writing for television, also starting the first few steps of my career as a TV writer, and while all that's been going on, finishing up my 5th book, which is out next month, called Presidential, and promoting my 4th book. Just came out in this, just as everything closed down. A Roll in the Hay decided to remind everyone what the countryside was like, just as we were told not to visit it for 3 months. So I guess it's all about the timing, but yeah, that's roughly who I am and what I've been up to while all this has been going on.
Oh, fantastic. So we've got a really diverse group here, which is going to be really, really interesting. So the first question I've got is, what we've been talking about writing throughout the panels we were doing yesterday, and it's very obvious every author has a different process of how they sit down and write. There's no one way to write a book, as we all know. So for you, what's your usual writing process, and how has the COVID situation and lockdown and the general situation changed things for you? Shall we start with Jen?
So I think the only thing that's changed me, because obviously I've still been going to work as usual almost. The only thing I haven't been doing is all the fun stuff like going to the cinema and things like that. So I guess my process is I get down a load of ideas on a piece of paper, I kind of mull them over for a few weeks, I write a very, very detailed plot with scenes to tick off as I write them. We then send a proposal to our publisher, because that's the way that we do things. You get a contract and then you start writing. The only difference I think in my process has been feeling able to write. It's been really stressful at work, because obviously I'm in a completely different setting to what I signed up to. I've also had anxiety and depression, so like that's really knocked the words that I can get out. Like sometimes I'll be like, well, I've got a spare 3 hours today and I should be writing, but I'm feeling so rubbish that actually I don't want to write, because I don't want those words to come out of somebody that's feeling like this. So I guess that's the only thing that's changed. I've actually been able to write all right. I've had some time off work, a few weeks, so although I haven't written loads during that time, I've written some, which has been good.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think a lot of us are going through sort of similar stages there. Lola, how about you? What's your usual process, and how have things changed?
I'm usually quite a gradual writer, lots of little increments daily, and just diving into things when I find a space, and never really having to think about it too much, thankfully. Like, oh, I've got free time, do I feel like writing? Go for it. That's a very pre-pandemic sort of mode. For when it first hit, for about 3 weeks, I literally couldn't do anything. I just was scrolling social media, watching the news. It was all incoming, nothing was outgoing at all. It just, I guess, just like a sort of processing sort of way. And then thankfully, someone handed me a good book at the end of that kind of 3 weeks. My wife was like, here, read this will distract you. And it was the first time I felt like, oh yeah, the world is going to continue and we're all going to be fine. Eventually, for given value of fine. But it kind of flipped that switch that allowed escapism, and sort of that part of the brain I didn't realize I was using, which must be where the writing comes from. It's the making things up, and it doesn't work terribly well when it's in panic mode. So once I got over that initial hump, I've been kind of using it almost as a retreat, really. Writing has become this lovely oasis of, there doesn't have to be a pandemic, we don't have to socially distance, you can make up your own rules, you can do what you want, you can go wherever you want in your head, so it's really become a kind of sanctuary almost, and I'm really grateful for it in a way I don't think I really was before. So.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely that you've been able to sort of have that new appreciation for writing.
Totally.
Yeah, especially as writing's such an important part of your job. So it's quite difficult sometimes, isn't it, when it's something that you have to do. It's nice to enjoy it.
It's not optional, but it's nice to be able to feel like you're still choosing it each time you sit down and say, I want to do this, and it feels like a good thing to be able to get, even if it's just 100 words, 500 words at a time. It's not this big sort of chore that it sometimes was before. So
that's lovely. And how about you, Kit? What was your process pre-COVID and during COVID?
Yeah, so I suppose, so I'm the total opposite to Jenn. So I don't plot at all. I just kind of start, have an idea and start and just kind of wing it from there. And the first draft is always just me sort of telling myself the story. So I'm not very organized, but I do have quite like a routine. So I tend to kind of write sort of first thing in the morning before work, so I'll get up quite early, kind of 6:30, and try and get a couple of hours in before work. And actually, in terms of kind of time to do that, lockdown's been quite good really, because it haven't really been able to go anywhere, so not really been having any late nights, don't have to leave the house to go to work, so kind of have extra time in the morning. So that side of things has been quite nice, dare I say it. I think I've had more sort of routine and more consistency around that, and I think, like Lola, I've found that it's been a really nice kind of escape. Actually, it's been a little sanctuary and a little haven, so it's been a really lovely thing to be able to kind of retreat into. I think the thing that I have found more difficult actually isn't the writing so much as the kind of the other aspects of being an author, so like the kind of marketing and social media side of things. So Sparks came out in July, and anyone who's read Blackout will know that it was quite a long time between Blackout and Sparks coming out, and so I kind of set the date. I needed to get it out, and then sort of lockdown happened, and I was like, okay, this doesn't really feel like a great time to be promoting a book. Like there's all these kind of massive, not just the pandemic, but then Black Lives Matter, and do people really want me on Twitter wanging on about my book when there's all this massive stuff going on in the world? So that was a tricky balance to get, and I think I also found that my job kind of moved, my sort of day job moving online and being virtual, kind of spending all day in front of the computer and talking to people, by the time it got to the end of the day, I was just like, I cannot do social media. That became really, really difficult. So so that I found quite hard, and I had to sort of kind of structure and kind of set aside time to do that. Otherwise I think I would have just avoided it completely. But yeah, the writing side of things, like Lola, I've actually kind of taken quite a lot of joy in.
Oh, that's good to hear. But that's interesting. So you had Sparks out in July. Lola, you had Rolled in the Hay come out during lockdown. Jen, did you have a book come out as well?
Yeah, Reasons to Heal came out in July.
Yeah,
that's about a lady who is from Zimbabwe. So the whole Black Lives Matter thing, I was just like, but I'm a white author bringing this out, and it totally wasn't like, I didn't mean for that to happen at all. It was just either the worst or the best kind of timing. I couldn't quite work out which, and I just felt really bad about promoting it, because it's about a Black woman, but it's from a white author. So I was just like, so I think I just felt a bit uncomfortable promoting it quite as much as I have my other two.
Yeah, it would have been different, wouldn't it, if it was not sort of Black Lives Matter's protest happening at that moment, and COVID and so on. So you all had books out releasing during lockdown. So Kit, obviously you found that hard to advertise and to talk about that. Do you feel that kind of sort of damaged your launch, or did you just kind of say, well, I have to release it now and I'm just going to go for it?
Yeah, I think I'd kind of committed to it at that point. So I was like, it's coming out and I just have to sort of do the best I can, really. I'd been sort of working towards it for a long time, and it sort of deserved me to kind of, I suppose, give it my best shot, really. So yeah, it's hard to say whether it sort of damaged the launch. I wouldn't say marketing's particularly my sort of forte anyway, but it had a really nice reception, actually. And one of the things that was really lovely and kind of unexpected was the sort of feedback I got from readers about it kind of feeling like the book they needed to read at that time, with this, which was really touching and surprising. So perhaps there was a kind of silver lining to it coming out then. It
would be nice, like, as Lola said, Lola had a book that encouraged her to start writing and to be that catalyst. So maybe Sparks is that for some other authors. So Lola, Rolled in the Hay, obviously that was fixed into your publisher's schedule. You wouldn't have been able to move it, so you were just sort of hurled into having to advertise. How did that go during COVID times?
I think what was a bit weird for me, I was really lucky. My first book, Music in the Mirror, although it was set in the US and it was a very Americanized kind of story because it came from Vic originally, there was this lovely support from like the Edinburgh and the Scottish lit scene, in terms of like I had a launch at my local indie bookshop, and they're super queer friendly, and they're just like amazing. Lighthouse Books just do so much for the community up here. And I was kind of thinking, well, this is finally it, book 4. I've written a book set in Scotland within an hour of Edinburgh itself, Scottish characters, cute, quirky things about our culture that I'm kind of really pleased to share with, readers who've come from all over the place, which is so, like, they're taking a chance on it. But I was kind of hoping to really promote the local aspect as well, and like being a native Scottish author kind of thing. And yeah, that feels, I do feel like I could maybe revisit it at some point. I did a little bit of promo in January and February before we all closed down, like just doing some readings and stuff. But that felt a wee bit like a missed opportunity to plug in to local readers. And also we've been talking a lot locally in Edinburgh about building sort of queer spaces that are not necessarily based around alcohol, and having a social scene that is a bit more both family friendly and also, you know, substance addiction friendly as well, for not putting pressure on people. So the one good thing that's come out of the pandemic is there's been a huge fundraiser done to open an LGBT cafe, which is going to be unlicensed, and it's going to be open sort of daytime hours and stuff like that. So I feel like, you know, for although things didn't quite happen the way I expected them to, there's now going to be hopefully new spaces post-pandemic where we can actually change things up a bit.
Yeah, that's fantastic. My wife and I constantly talk about that, is if you want to hang out with LGBT people, then, like, you know, you've got to go like clubbing or to a bar, and that is not our scene. We're too old, and in fact we've been too old for that since, you know, we were born, so it's just never been our scene. But yeah, no, that's fantastic. So next time in Edinburgh, I'm definitely coming there. Jenn, so obviously you had Black Lives Matter to contend with as well, but on the sort of COVID side of things, did you feel a bit sort of icky advertising your new release during that time, or were you just in yourself not feeling that you could?
Yeah, I don't think, I'll be honest, I don't think the COVID situation really, I didn't really connect that with my release at all. I just, it was quite late on in lockdown. You know, we'd had like 4 months of it, and I got some feedback from various people saying, actually, you know, although book sales took a bit of a slump at the beginning, now they're going up again, so that's good. So I didn't really think too much about it. The only difference, again, same as you, Lola, was that I, you know, with my last 2 books, I had awesome launch parties. You know, I had we've got a very small LGBT bar called Proud Bar, and Nige, who runs that, he was very, very much up for doing book releases and has done both of mine. And it was just a real kind of, because I was really looking forward to going and having that, and, you know, putting videos and stuff on YouTube like I usually do, and having readings and question and answers and stuff. And yeah, it just didn't happen. And afterwards I kind of thought about it and thought, well, I could have done something online, but actually it didn't feel the same, and I wasn't very well at the time, I have to admit. So yeah, it was just a bit of a slump. So I'm hoping my next release in, I think it's January, things have kind of hopefully moved on and opened up a bit again, and we can go back to doing those local kind of events and having fun with releases.
Yeah, well, my wife always has book birthdays, so you know, the day your book comes out is his birthday, and then after that it's 1 year old, 2 year old, whatever. So you can have like a 1 year old birthday party for both your books, and go to your respective venues and celebrate a little cake and everything. I mean, it's
I
an
like
excuse,
that idea.
it's an excuse for a cake. I just go for it. I'll be at both. Not just
Do we have a joint one, Kit, as we live quite close together?
I don't think I've needed any excuse for cake during lockdown. I've been doing a lot of baking, probably too much considering they've not actually been able to see anybody else.
My puppy turned 1 in July, and I did bake him a doggy cake, and they were actually quite nice. We had one each.
I helped Tesco with their overstock of Easter eggs, because like on the second week of lockdown they obviously had a load of Easter eggs, and they were all reduced to like £1 or £2, and I thought I will selflessly help you remove some of this stock.
So selfless.
It's a public service, Amanda, really.
Absolutely, honestly, they were like, get in, get out of Tesco as quick as you can, and I was just like phoning Emma. I was like, do you want dairy milk or do you want Maltesers? Oh hell, I'll get both.
Do you want 10 or do you want 20?
Yeah, exactly, that was it. Could you carry my other trolley, my egg trolley? So yeah, it was, but you know, you have to do these things, you know, you have to fall on your sword now and then. So if you did write during COVID, subsequently looking at it, did you like what you wrote? because obviously, you know, we put a lot of ourselves into our books, and, you know, your mental state at the time does shine through. I've certainly noticed that times when I've been a bit down, I've looked later and gone, God, I was depressed when I wrote that, and you've had to sort of go back and edit things. So what did you think about what you wrote, if you did write during COVID times? Lola, can we start with you?
I was mostly editing, which, as we all know, is kind of a form of rewriting, I suppose, in that sense. And I'm a weird kind of masochist about being edited. I love that it's so much better at the end of the process than when you start it. But this is the first time I think I got the big angry track changes document back, and it really disheartened me for a couple of days. It really put me off my stride. And I just total crisis of confidence, can't write, can't speak English, which is unfortunate because I don't really speak anything else. I just totally, and it was professionally, sensitively edited, brilliant edit as normal, like it has been every other time, but just for some reason it just struck just a personal level that wasn't intended. I think maybe just feeling a bit raw generally with everything that was going on. So I had to kind of walk it off almost a bit. I was kind of in the garden pacing up and down like, I need to throw this book out and start again. I don't know what to do. But luckily a friend of mine is a freelance editor, and she was like, well, let me see if it's you or if it's the edits, and then you can, take it that way. And she looked at the edits and she was like, no, they're really good edits, and it's still a really good book. So just wait until you feel better, and then go back to it. But compared to what I started with to what I ended up with, it was finally like, it's still in there, it's still me. It did feel a bit lost for a while.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Jen, how about you? Did you subsequently like what you'd written during COVID?
I'm just looking when I was writing, because I do the thing of kind of checking how many kind of days I'm writing and what I'm writing and stuff. It looks like I finished my 4th book on my sister's birthday. That's cute. Mid-April. And then I kind of leave it a couple of weeks and I go back to it. And I'm actually really proud of my 4th book. So my 3rd book was kind of done and dusted by then, out in July. But yeah, my 4th book, Sing for My Baby, that I was really proud of that book. Unfortunately, the edit was cut 20,000 words, and I was like, right, okay. But I always get that first editing letter, I always get upset every single time. It's now something I expect. So it's like I get the letter, I read it, I then go away for a few days and have a cry, and then I get over it, and I come back and I write a to-do list, literally, like, get rid of all the unneeded words and that's and thens and all of that stuff, and I just find it easier that way, because I can see how much progress I'm making with the edit, and I can kind of tick off everything that I do. So yeah, I'm still really proud of my 4th book. I'm really excited about like January, because it's a really cool book, and yeah, my fingers crossed. But yeah, I think I've started my 5th book writing the first draft, and things that I'm writing, I think I forget what I write, because I kind of do what you said you do, Amanda, yesterday in one of the panels. I go back through what I've just written the last time I wrote, and then I start writing the next bit. So yeah, a couple of times recently I've kind of gone back over what I wrote like 3 days ago, and I've just been like, this isn't bad. This is okay. I can't remember using that word. It sounds really intelligent, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
I always feel woefully inadequate when I see you posting your word count total, not the amount you're writing per day, but like the dizzying heights you get to when you're like 125,000 words, and I'm like, that's 3 books for me. What are you doing? Slow down, Jen. Kit, so how about you? Did you subsequently like what you wrote during COVID?
Yeah, I had the best time writing during COVID, actually. So I have always written young adult, and fairly dark speculative fiction, is my kind of thing, really. And I've spent lockdown writing something totally different, which was a really kind of sort of light-hearted, tongue-in-cheek kind of lesbian adventure romance for adults. And yeah, it was so much fun, and it's finished and I really like it. It was really great to do something where I didn't have any kind of expectations, because it's not really my usual sort of brand, I suppose, and didn't really know where it was going to go. It kind of started as just a sort of a thing, that kind of a short story, really, a sort of, you know, just a bit of a short exercise, and it just kind of took on a life of its own. And yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with it now, but I'm really pleased with it, and I had a really lovely time writing it, and actually that was a big part of, you know, I sort of spoke about having the kind of time to write, but having the motivation to write, I think, came from doing something that just felt really fun and really different and quite light-hearted, and as Lola was kind of saying, a little bit sort of escapist. So yeah, so there's been a kind of unexpected silver lining, really.
And do you think the situation was why you wrote something light-hearted rather than your sort of more dystopian stuff?
I think so. I think I don't, not necessarily sort of consciously. I think it was just kind of what was sort of there in at the time, you know. And I as I was saying, I don't plan really very much what I'm going to write. I think I'll just, you know, something will kind of pop up and I'll be like, oh, that sounds, you know, that looks like fun, and I'll kind of just follow the thread. So that just sort of, I suppose, was there at the time, but I definitely had this kind of pull towards, you know, kind of doing something that was more fun and more lighthearted and not very serious, and I think that probably was to do with just how serious everything in the rest of the world felt at the time. It felt nice to just be able to kind of retreat for a couple of hours a day into something that was completely different. And yeah,
I don't blame you. Everything was quite dark. It must have been quite like, okay, there's rainbows and flowers and everything's fine.
Yeah, I surprised myself, actually, I think, with, you know, because I think I have a tendency to kind of, you know, sometimes I'll be like, I should write a romantic comedy, and then I'll sort of start thinking about it, and then I'll be, this little bit in my brain will be like, and then a murder, and like it doesn't go, you know, so it doesn't go very well when I try to write lighthearted stuff. So I kind of surprised myself by being able to kind of finish this thing without anybody dying in the plot. So yeah, it was a nice surprise.
I'm always the other way around. I try to write something quite serious. I think I'll write something quite serious and that will really tug on people's heartstrings, and I just end up putting like really bad jokes into it, and like one of the characters just constantly cracking jokes, and Emma's like, you've written a comedy. I'm like, I know, I don't, just damn, I did it again. But yeah, people seem to laugh, so that's positive. Okay, so this is gonna, I know this has divided my readers, so has this situation encouraged you to reference pandemics or COVID or anything about this situation in future books, especially for the, well, I say two of you, but now sort of three of you, I suppose, you write contemporary. If you know, would you write about COVID, or are you just going to pretend that just never happened, that just doesn't exist? And should we go to Lola for that?
I think probably what the past few months has shown me more than anything is how different the cycles are for the two types of writing I'm doing. So for books, it's such a long lifespan from idea to publishing that I feel like I've learned once and for all to stop trying to sneak stuff in while it's like very timely, because by the time it actually gets to readers, there's this huge gap. But for TV, it's obviously, it just kind of cratered the TV industry for a few months and nothing could happen. That's much more tempting to be, and also from like a production point of view as well, when things are gearing up, you know, I'm pitching to write for things that are happening in the autumn, and we're already having to think, right, so they physically can't be in the same room. You're going to have actors do stuff like, you know, have a romantic storyline without touching each other, and there's a real sort of challenge element to it that makes me think that it'll come into books and stuff, and people will do it well. But I think I like my novels. I think the beautiful thing about them so far has been that they've all existed in worlds that are a little bit better than this one, where there's, you know, not a lot of rampant homophobia, and people are much more accepting and happier and able to make good choices. So I kind of don't want to crash the party for my books. I want them to be, you know, my next book's called Presidential because it's set in the world of US politics. And I mean, is there a bigger trash fire on the planet right now other than politics? UK, US, it's all just, oh my God. And it was so nice to go back to that kind of 90s West Wing, you know, people are basically good, but sometimes they do bad things kind of mentality, and sort of write about that political world and not who's grifting, who stole an election, who's breaking the law today. You know, it was a really lovely way out. So I think COVID's done well. I would love to read, but I don't think I want to bring it into my own particular sort of bubble, if you like.
Yeah, fair enough. I've never watched The West Wing until recently. COVID came and Emma was like, right, we're watching The West Wing, which she's been trying to get me to watch for like 10 years. And I was like, this is great. Like, I wish, but you could see the age of it. You could see that politics is not like that now. And I was like, oh, do you remember when this was as bent as we thought politics could get?
It could get any worse than, oh dear.
Yeah. And then suddenly everyone's like, oh, you know, I'll vote whoever, because, you know, what's the worst they can do? What's the worst that can happen? Well, there could be a pandemic and our lives could rely on it. So, you know, vote sensibly. Anyway, Jenn, would you mention COVID in your contemporary romances?
I think until it's over, probably not. I'm very much of the kind of escapism thing. The book that I'm writing currently is set in a very cute little market village in the Pennines, and it's just so lovely and idyllic and gorgeous, because I'm from there. So yeah, I think at the moment I'm just kind of not doing that. Working in healthcare for the last 12 years, you know, I need to have some healthcare in some stuff at some point, and I probably will do either something related to my experiences or something that's kind of COVID-esque, so maybe like an alternate universe, or a little bit maybe like Blackout, Kit, so, you know, we get kind of this country but a slightly different version of COVID. I would like to write it because I've had lots of experience looking after people who potentially have it, so yeah, I think it'd be interesting to do that, but how I would do that I've no idea, and I don't think I'd do it until it's kind of all over, as much as it can be over.
Do you think it would be cathartic for you, having worked in the NHS during the pandemic? Do you think to actually, once it was all over, just to be able to sort of get that out of your system?
Yeah, probably. My wife's also a paramedic practitioner at a GP surgery, so she's got kind of the primary care version of what's going on as well. So yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of do something related to it.
Jenn, didn't you and your wife had to socially distance from each other at one point in your house?
Yes. So the day that we all went into lockdown, I developed a cough. I have a cough a lot. I get a lot of coughs, but to be on the safe side, we basically, Sarah barrier nursed me for a week, basically. We have a very big house, which is wonderful. I was literally in the bedroom with the ensuite for 7 days. I didn't come out once. Sarah was bringing up my meals, so I was texting her my orders, and she'd literally bring up my meals in this plastic tub. I would take the meals out, I would eat the meals, and I would put them back in. She'd take them downstairs and put them straight in the dishwasher. It was just like, it was bizarre. But yeah, basically.
Did you really have a cough though?
No, I did.
Yeah. Or did you just fancy a week's holiday of someone waiting on you?
If you watch the vlogs that I did, at the time, you can see that I did some very interesting things to keep myself entertained. I managed to walk 10,000 steps around the bedroom some of the days, which I think is quite impressive. But yeah, I was literally in one room for 7 days without coming out. And
goodness, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so Kit, going back, because I'm sure you've not locked yourself in a room for 7 days. Would you?
Fortunately not.
Would you be up for referencing pandemics in your work?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't have any sort of burning inclination to do so. I have to say. I think I don't tend to write about direct kind of things that are sort of too closely aligned to sort of my own life. I don't tend to write directly about sort of my own experiences. I think what tends to happen more for me is that kind of certain themes or kind of emotions kind of get processed through the way I write. So there might be sort of more kind of abstract things kind of I think kind of coming up in my writing. Like I think Sparks for me was, when I sort of look back on it, I think I can kind of see that a lot of it was very much a sort of exercise in processing kind of tolerating uncertainty, and I can kind of, I suppose, make sense of that in the context of the things that were sort of happening in my life when I was writing it, but none of those kind of specific events are sort of evident in the book, I suppose, and I don't really have any sort of desire to do that. I think so. I think that probably at some point, I'm sure that some of the kind of emotional experiencing will sort of find its way into a future book, and perhaps some processing will happen that way. But I don't think I would write a book directly about COVID. Whether there are more sort of tangential things, like whether I sort of reference social distancing and things like that, so it's not about COVID, but I also kind of contain sort of elements of things that have been happening in the world. That's a really interesting question. I think probably not at the moment. I think it would probably be quite, I think again, I don't really know how much, I guess everyone's living it, aren't they? And I don't really know how keen people are going to be to kind of be like, oh, no one can touch each other in the books either. Like, I don't know how fun that would be to read. It's an interesting one. I do think that kind of things like, there are sort of interesting questions around things like kind of how people sort of respond and how society responds in the aftermath, and the sort of like longer term, the kind of wider sort of, less kind of, perhaps kind of less immediately obvious effects. I think there are sort of interesting questions there that I'm sure there'll be some really interesting kind of fiction will kind of arise out of people getting to grips with those, I think, whether that will be me or not. I probably not at the moment, but I suppose never say never. Yeah,
it's a tough one. I'd finished a novel just as lockdown started, and because I'm a full-time author, I pretty much like picked up the next thing and thought, right, I kind of had an idea of what I was writing, but then I was like, COVID's not going to go away. That, like, people were like, oh, we're locked down for 2 weeks and it'll all be gone, and I was like, no, it won't. It's going to be here for months. It's probably going to be here for a couple of years at least. My book's going to be coming out in July, so I was very much at that point thinking, do I reference this because it's a contemporary romance? Do I talk about this? So I polled my readers, and it was 50-50. 50% of people went, no, I absolutely don't want to hear about it. No, like, it doesn't exist. And then 50% of people were like, well, yeah, it's life now. So, there should be a one-way system in the bakers. So I was just like, oh, okay. So I ignored it. And we'll see if that was real good idea for me to do. We have a question in the group from M.A. Binfield for a bit of light relief, which, this will be a fun one. In a parallel universe, who would you most want to be quarantined with? Give you a couple of seconds to think about that one. And shall we go to Kit again? Do you want to, who are you going to be quarantined with?
In a parallel universe, well, I've been quarantined with my girlfriend and our cat, and honestly, this is going to be really cheesy and really, but I can't think of anyone I'd rather be quarantined with, to be honest.
Lola, Jen, I'll kick her out now. Hold on.
I know. Sorry. I also can't think of anyone else who'd put up with me spending all day every day with me for 6 months, to be honest. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go with a really cheesy answer, I'm afraid.
No, that's a lovely answer. That's really sweet. Jen, how about you?
Yeah, my wife, definitely. No. Been there, done that. Parallel universe, though. Sandy Toksvig. because
That's a good one.
she's shorter than me, which is awesome. A lot of people are not shorter than me. She gives the best hugs, apparently, from all the kind of clips that I've seen on YouTube and stuff of all the montages of her hugging people, and she's very intelligent and quite funny. So
is that a thing? Montages of Sandy Toxic hugging people?
yeah, apparently so. I've seen a couple of them. Yeah.
I feel so out of the loop. I love Sandy Toxic. I had no idea that was a thing. Okay, right, I shall be looking at that after. Lola, who would you like to be quarantined with?
Oh, there's a decision for you. Do you know this is I'm going to be honest and go with the first answer that pops into my head, and it's actually Jurgen Klopp. So the fact that there's not even a woman is frankly shocking me at this point. But he seems like just genuinely nice company, and he's very positive and very let's make the best of it. And I think if you were really stuck,
yeah,
that would be a good thing, because I can be a little bit of a cynic and I can spiral quite quickly. So I think between us, we probably rebuild whatever house we were stuck in, or invent a new sport or something. But it would be the most positive way I can think of getting through being stuck. But honestly, I much like I can't complain, because we were kind of used to working from home together anyway. My wife and I, we kind of got into a nice system of sharing the room and to work in, and the cats and their shenanigans. So it really has been, and that's on that front, despite all the stress, it's actually been really pleasant and just quality time without really having to carve it out of a really busy time. So I've been enjoying being able to just say, hey, shall we spend the whole day together, and nobody can stop us. there's no outside interference. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's been the same with us, because we live in a 3-bedroom house, and two of the bedrooms are offices, because we both work from home and have done for 4 years now since we moved into this house. So when COVID happened, we were like, right, we can't go out, we have to work from home, and we have to it's life, it's just for Tuesday. Okay, great. So other than not going to the cinema and having to condense our, well, I say shopping, our Easter egg buying to one of us going once a week, other than that, it was March, really. Okay, so we talked about whether or not you would write about COVID. Would you read a book that referenced COVID, not specifically about people dying in hospital, because that's no joy, but would you read a book where there was a one-way line around the bakery and where people were social distancing? Jen, shall we start with you?
I don't think it would be relevant in the books. I don't read a lot, I have to say. I do read. I read when I can. I find it really difficult to read when I'm writing, because that's 2 stories in my head, and it's I don't think it would be a deciding factor. If something was set in COVID and I liked the blurb and I liked, I'd heard good things about it, then I would read it. I don't think it would. The only thing that would annoy me is, this annoys me in real life, if the science wasn't correct, or that because I work a lot with healthcare workers, and obviously my wife is the brainiac of the biology world, and anything that is wrong, just for example, when they used to shock asystole on Casualty, we'd just look at each other and be like, why are you trying to stop an already stopped heart? What is going on? That kind of thing. So that would annoy me if there was anything in there, but it wouldn't stop me reading it in the first place,
Cool. How about you, Kit? Would you read something with a sort of COVID-like scenario?
Are there queer women in it? That's
absolutely. Are there books that don't have queer women in?
I don't know. I can't think of any.
No.
I don't think it would be a deciding factor. I don't think it's something I would necessarily seek out. I think one of the things that is really beautiful and one of the best things about fiction, I think, is the way that you can find that kind of common experience, common humanity, in kind of reading about different situations and people whose lives are different from your own. And I think we're all very well aware at this point of what lockdown is like and the kind of social effects of COVID. So that's it's not something I would necessarily seek out, but I don't think it would wouldn't put me off if I knew if I'd heard sort of good things about the book. I do think, kind of going back a little bit to what I was saying before, I do think there are sort of more interesting questions to be explored about kind of the longer term sort of social and kind of societal impacts, and I think that is something I'd be interested in kind of reading more, you know, kind of fiction that sort of explored that side of things. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Lola, how about you? Would it impact your reading choices?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of keen to see the first wave of stuff that comes out of it book-wise, because I think what we're probably going to get a wave of, or, well, this is just me speculating really, but you know, the kind of historical romances where it's also forbidden and you can barely touch and you have to be kept apart with chaperones, and getting back to that, I mean, I love that level of angst in fic as well, in fanfic. So that, you know, one touch can basically, you know, the brushing of hands can stand in for an entire physical relationship. I think that'd be really interesting to see in a modern setting, just without all the, you know, restrictions of olden times, but having them where like the queerness and everything that's accepted and that's part of our current landscape, but putting those physical restrictions on people. And you know, I think we're probably going to get some good like epistolaries and you know, long distance romances, but the distance is actually only 2 meters, and it's going to be kind of fun to see. But I think there's probably some very creative minds going to have a better spin on it than that. So I'm kind of enthused to see the good side of this once we get through it.
Instead of people writing kind of like in historical romances where you have like people writing long pining love letters, it will just be weeks and weeks of Tinder messaging. Like that'll be the
blog posts full of yearning. You know, so I dare say there's probably quite a lot of that coming. So I'm kind of braced and ready for it, and hopefully I think it'll be quite fun when it's a memory, when it's remember how we all had to do that crazy stuff, and then, you know, hopefully we'll be on the other side of it at some point.
Do you remember when we were bacterial wiping down the fruit as it came into the house? All that craziness. I think like step one obviously is choosing like what kind of story you're going to write. You're going to write a story where you've got 2 people who've fallen in love from that 2 meter distance, or 2 people who have suddenly had to quarantine together, like, which, you know, and obviously if it's the Ice Queen and the assistant, as me and Lola know, they will obviously have to suddenly be quarantined together.
It's law.
It's we didn't make the rules, we just follow them. Okay, so obviously we haven't been able to see loved ones and we haven't been able to travel, so there's a creative well that, you know, most of us authors need to keep filled. Have you struggled to feel creative with staying in for so long? Obviously we're allowed out a little bit more now, but during sort of peak COVID time, did you struggle, or did your creativity sort of kick in and allow you to carry on? How about you, Kit? How did you cope?
I think I was quite fortunate in that I was quarantined, you know, I was in lockdown in a, you know, really in a position of privilege. You know, I knew that my job was safe, you know, I was quarantining, you know, with somebody that I love, and, you know, we live somewhere that, you know, that is fine, and we don't have, you know, we didn't have to worry about food, or, you know, all those kind of basic sort of things that are just, you know, requirements to be able to sort of like function creatively, and you know, I didn't have to worry about any of those things, and I'm really, really fortunate, because I know that wasn't, you know, the experience of a lot of people in lockdown. And, you know, and also I was living, you know, with somebody who fortunately I get on with, you know, so and it was, so it was a kind of supportive and comfortable environment, and I'm really lucky. And I think that has meant that it didn't impact on my sort of ability to kind of be creative too much. I don't think. I think, you know, I kind of managed to sort of tap into this kind of sort of hitherto sort of unnoticed kind of part of me that really wanted to write sort of light, fluffy things. So I think longer term though, I feel like if I just never went out, you know, if lockdown went on for a long, long time, I think I would just be really boring. You know, I think that a lot of what we yeah, a lot of what we write about comes from our kind of, you know, our interactions with the world and with other people, you know, and you know, eventually if we know we don't have that, then I think probably creativity will dry up eventually. So yeah, I think I was lucky. I think I found it okay for this amount of time. If I'd done it for a year, I don't think I would be a very interesting person with very interesting things to write about, but hopefully it won't come to that. So yeah.
So when we do the next virtual conference after we have been locked down for a year, we'll check in with you and see.
Just see whether I've actually got anything interesting to say, or whether I still know how to hold a conversation with a human being.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. After the second wave hit. Anyway, so Lola, how about you?
I've just been out today and I met up with while my wife was off horse riding. I met up with a friend from my MA, and that's the first time I've seen anyone socially other than my family since lockdown, really, other than, like, you know, shouting at people over the edge of the garden fence and stuff. But it was like a conscious meet up and hangout thing, and the amount of input from people walking past and hearing snippets of conversations and watching like families getting in and out the car and arguing over whose turn it is to walk the dog. And I was like, oh, humans, you're all still out here. And it was like a shot in the arm. It really was. It was like someone had turned the volume back up, and I was like, I miss coffee shops like a missing limb. I do so much of my writing, you know, messing about, whether it's like, you know, big corporate ones or little indie ones. Me and my laptop are always sort of out somewhere in one of them at the moment, before all this anyway. And the other thing that's weird is I didn't realize how much like creative stuff comes in like alone time, because the other thing that's been the biggest change is by being locked down with someone, you're always aware of someone else being in the house, even though, you know, we're lucky we've got enough space to kind of be in our separate rooms and not interact if we don't want to. I find I miss things like being able to, you know, talk absolute nonsense to the cats when it's just me in the house, or, you know, practice your Oscar speech in the bathroom while you're brushing your teeth, because someone can hear you now. And there's just not that chunk of the day that I'm used to having where Kate was at work or she was out getting coffee or whatever. So getting used to working without that has been really weird, but I think it's helped. But I can't wait till, you know, she was away 2 days last week camping, and I was like, I can talk to myself, I can say whatever nonsense, I can sing at the top of my voice, you know, and I'm not ruining anyone's day. So that was pretty fun. Those are the two big changes, I think, for me.
Yeah, no, I completely understand both of it. Yeah, I mean, Emma goes to the gym quite a lot, but obviously not now.
Yeah.
And that was like my real sort of like me time for about like an hour. Like she goes nearly every day. I was like, and now I've been like, then I was like, do you fancy like going out? Yeah, where should we go? I was like, no, do you fancy going out? You could go somewhere. But I love you with all my heart.
Just 1 hour.
Yeah, just please. Jen, how about you? How has it affected your creativity?
I don't think it's affected it that much. I mean, the alone thing is very strange, because I like being alone despite being married for the last 6 years. We historically have worked lots of shifts, me and my wife, so the chances of us being in the house at the same time are quite slim. But recently she's been working from home a lot more. She can kind of do that. That's an option for her. It's not her first kind of choice, but she can do that. So the times when she would usually be at work and I've got a day off, or I've got an afternoon off, or whatever shift I'm doing, she sat on the sofa with her laptop with cams on and talking to patients on the phone and stuff. And I'm just like, can you not do that somewhere else? Or like, is there not somewhere else you could be? Because I've discovered Netflix. We bought a new TV which has smart capabilities, so that's very exciting. So yeah, I will happily kind of sit and watch Netflix and stuff, and that's things like that are kind of where I get my inspiration for stuff, because although I'm a social person inside because of my nerve damage in my face, I don't have a lot of energy to be social with people outside. So, and my wife she's not a hugely social person. We do see people and go on dog walks and stuff, but like, she's not the kind of person that would go to a pub and just kind of meet a big group of people and spend hours with them. So we're quite secular, and we kind of stay in quite a bit and watch TV and films. We've watched a lot of films. Amazon Prime and Netflix have been kind of our go-to places. So yeah, I mean, I think I've become maybe more creative. Work has obviously changed for me. I started out in until April in a rehab ward, where we literally see the same 7 maximum people every day, and they're with us for a maximum of 2 years. So literally that has stopped, and I'm now working on a COVID assessment ward where we see people for 14 days maximum, and then they go somewhere else. So there's a massive turnover. So all of these older adults are kind of coming in, and they've got a variety of different personalities, and they're really interesting. We're also having a lot of agency work with us who are fantastic, you know, real colourful kind of clusters of people that you see different people on different days depending on what they're working. So it's really interesting. I think I've seen more people at work, like more different people at work, than I have in 8 years, you know, of being on the rehab board, and that's been quite interesting. And I've had my eyes have opened quite a lot for kind of inspiration for different people, I guess.
Yeah, so that's actually been really helpful for you then, hasn't it, to get all that extra input?
Yeah.
You've got your Netflix account and your new turnover of patients. You're just like, just need a notepad, jotting it all down.
Yeah.
So we have a couple more minutes just for the final question. And this is brilliant because you have all been writing. So what advice would you give to an author, a fellow author who was struggling to write during COVID times? Jen, can we pop back to you first?
I mean, the things that have, sorry, motorbike. The things that have worked for me, I think, have just been not to put so much pressure on myself. I've been having a lot of kind of talking therapy and counselling, and I've had a CBT session a couple of weeks ago. I've got another one next week. And I think just kind of realising that you don't have to be always at it. You know, you don't have to be always being creative. If you put that pressure on yourself, it's just going to make you poorly. So, you know, I'm now kind of thinking, okay, I'm writing when I want to write. I know I've got kind of deadlines for stuff, but I'm also thinking about how I can improve the way that my life feels. So, you know, I'm kind of looking at, in the next decade or so, actually maybe writing full time, and how I'd actually get there. And that's quite motivating for me. It gives me a lot of hope, because actually I could do it. Like, there's no reason why I can't do it. You know, there were all these amazing people like Amanda and Claire and everybody who were just doing it. You know, they're living the dream. And actually, I think I've come to a point in my life where I do want to do that, or at least, you know, nurse less and write more. So yeah, don't put so much pressure on yourself, but maybe have goals, and figure out a way to sort out how you're going to get to your goals, maybe.
Yeah, no, fantastic advice. Kit, what advice would you give to an author that's struggling at the moment?
I think the first thing I would say is to recognise that we are living in really extraordinary times, and I think there is this kind of societal kind of attitude that we must be super productive all of the time, and that's like the thing to aspire to. And if you know, and I think that's true, you know, all the time, but particularly in COVID, I think a lot of people were like, okay, well, I must use my lockdown time really productively, and there's this kind of expectation that isn't actually very realistic, that we just should be kind of going and going and going all the time, and actually, you know, we're living in hugely uncertain, stressful, kind of anxiety provoking times, you know, and those things are not really conducive to our kind of new brain capacities with things like sort of imagination. You know, that when we're anxious and stressed, that bit, you know, that's taking up a lot of our brain power, you know, and that bit of our brain that's kind of processing all of that and managing all of that is really separate to the bit of our kind of new brain that sort of does things like imagination and creativity and thinking about the past and future, and, you know, all the stuff you need to do for writing. So I think it's really important to kind of recognize that, and to look after your mental health first. Do whatever you need to do to kind of manage your anxiety or your low mood, or the stress that kind of comes with living in this kind of insane world that we're living in at the moment, and worry about that first, and worry about writing second. I think that would be the first piece of advice. I think my second piece of advice is really around just not having expectations, both of kind of how much you write, but also of what you write. If you are kind of stuck and you're finding it hard to kind of get into the thing that you think you should be doing, do something else. If you've try something fun, write a short story, do something that you wouldn't normally do, like just take the kind of pressure and the expectation of yourself, and just do something just for the kind of joy of it, and write whatever brings you joy. I know that's really cheesy, but I think it's really important. Just whatever you're doing, make sure that you're enjoying doing it, and sort of immerse yourself in that, I think would be my advice.
I think that's very solid advice. I think a lot of people just kind of drift along and don't necessarily look and go, am I happy? I think that's a really important thing to do. Lola, what advice would you give to authors who are struggling at the moment?
The first, I guess, the best thing for me was make writing feel like a treat again, like something that you maybe part of like a kind of self-care routine that you carve out for yourself, in the same ways you would say, hey, tonight I'm gonna have a glass of wine and a bubble bath and a face mask. Make it feel like that, instead of, oh god, I have to go to my laptop at the desk and I can't do it anymore. And another thing that helped me was physically changing the writing environment. So I felt very much a prisoner of my laptop at one point. So I'm lucky enough, I've got an iPad kicking around and a Bluetooth keyboard, and I just got that out and sat in a different room. And I've been trying to work in the garden as well, weather permitting. It's still Scotland, but and just the good thing about tablets sometimes as well is you can only be in one app at a time. You can't have multiple things all visible to you. So if you go into whatever app you're writing in, whether it's Word or Google Docs or whatever, you can just have that and just the keyboard, and you say, I'm going to let myself have 30 minutes. I'm going to give that to myself as a treat. And if nothing happens, nothing happens. But a lot of the time I find that I get 30 minutes of actual writing and not checking something on Wikipedia or changing my playlist or all the other things that distract me on the laptop. So I think I'm going to keep that up as a good practice thing. And when I really want to write, I want to get something done, go onto a one app at a time kind of format and just stay in it until I run out of words. So that seems to be helping.
That's really good advice, and that's actually what I do. I got my iPad out and I was like, I'm gonna sit at the dining room table where I feel like I'm taking up someone else's space, so I should do something for a certain amount of time. Thank you all so much. That's been so interesting, and I'm so glad that you've all managed to keep writing, and you've all seem to have found quite a lot of joy in your writing and escapism. So thank you so much for joining us, and for everyone who's watching on Facebook, stay tuned, because the next panel will be about writing in other genres, so stay tuned for that later.